Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So it's Tier List Tuesday, and I thought, considering I've tier list general managers before, but more so looking at their overall tenure as a general manager of their respective teams, how good of general managers I thought they were overall. I thought today we'd look at just this season, what they did, starting in like late last year, late May, June. We saw some trades go down, like the Provorov trade and stuff like that, all the way up until right now. So any offseason trades once their team were eliminated, the draft, free agency signing, this year's trade deadline, how I think they did overall this season based on expectations, based on goals. I'm not going to grade Bill Zito the same that I'm going to grade Mike Greer in terms of overall competitiveness. They have two wildly different objectives this season and carried them out in different ways. So in looking at it, let's get into it. Here are the tiers. Keeping it basic. Good, great, good, solid, meh, bad. Not go with these different in-depth tiers. Very straightforward. Up first, Lou Lamoriello. Bad. I'm not going to criticize him for not doing anything at the deadline. I think that probably was the correct decision at the end of the day. I didn't really want to quite trade a Brock Nelson yet. I think maybe you do that down the line. But he gets a bad mainly because of the Mayfield and Engvall contracts, both on 7-year deals. One, Mayfield's $3.5 million, Engvall's $3 million. Those are looking pretty goddamn bad right now. Varley's deal at 4 years, I believe $2.75 million. That's actually solid, but he signed some pretty bad contracts this summer, and even the Sorokin one, which hindsight's 2020 on that. Sorokin hasn't been good this year, but now 8 years, 8.25. That's looking a little bit hefty considering he didn't play that good. Overall, not good for the New York Islanders. Last year, they lost in 6 games to Carolina. He ran back basically the same team, except Zach Parise wasn't on the team, and they lost in 5 games. So pretty bad job. Jim Nill, you got to go with great when looking at it. Probably the best free agent signing out of anybody this offseason. Matt Duchene for only $3 million puts up like 63 points this season. On top of the fact, didn't go all in at the deadline, but got a very effective player, one of like the top players on the market in Chris Tanev for only a 2nd and 3rd round pick. Very good job by Jim Nill. He'd be a Jim Gregory finalist, in my opinion, for this season. Brian McClellan, Washington Capitals general manager. I'm going to go good. Washington, not the most inspiring team right now, not the best future, but I think they are going through this rebuild, retool kind of phase, and he did a pretty good job at it while still putting a very competitive product on the ice and a lot of their young guys showing some flashes at the deadline. Before the deadline, he drafts Ryan Leonard first off at 8th overall in 2023. That's a fantastic deal. That's a fantastic draft pick as of right now. He tore it up at Boston College, but then at the deadline, trades for a 2nd and a 4th for Anthony Mantha, very good value. Gets off the Kuznetsov contract, who's getting $8 million. Yes, they're retaining half of that, but gets off that for an asset, as well as just allowing their younger guys to play more. I think Brian McClellan actually had a very good season, even though Washington might have been the most average or below average team in the entire league. Steve Stais, tough because he came in for Pierre Dorian. Couldn't really do that much. Didn't have that much time. Not like he had a draft and a free agency to go over. I'm going to go meh. I mean, the Tarasenko trade is objectively bad. It's like one of the worst deals of the deadline, but he did have a no movement clause. He kind of forced his way to Florida for only a 3rd and a 4th round pick. I think meh is okay. Sweeney, I'm going to go with solid. Boston was a highly competitive team this year, but when looking at Sweeney, he didn't really have that much cap mobility this season to really be aggressive, whether it was in free agency, although he got JVR on a very good deal. Shattenkirk was pretty solid, and he couldn't really do much at the deadline given that cap structure and the fact that they don't have their 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, I believe, in this year's draft. So he couldn't really do much, but still, despite that, Boston was a very good team. Pat Verbeek, I'm going to go with good to solid to good. When looking at the draft, people thought he massively reached on my boy Leo Carlsson. Leo Carlsson's looking like a stud. The people massively overreacted to that. Did a good job with that selection. On top of the fact that he waited out. Actually, no, he's definitely in good. Now that I just remembered the Gauthier trade. What am I saying? Maybe even great, given the direction that they're heading. But Zegras, they wait him out, get him on a pretty cheap deal at 3 years, $5.75 million. Then trade for Cutter Gauthier, take advantage of that situation, only give up Drysdale and a 2nd round pick. On top of the fact of getting a 1st round pick for Adam Henrique. Pat Verbeek had a very good season, even though on the ice it wasn't pretty. They're definitely trending towards the right direction. Their core is looking even better. Guys like Minchikov, Carlson, McTavish all looked very good at the NHL level. Good job by Pat Verbeek this season. Steve Yzerman, I'm going to go good as well. I think you can make an argument for great. If they made the playoffs, I definitely would have him in great. Signed some fantastic 1-year deals with Patrick Kane, Shane Gothisbehere, Daniel Sprong. Alex Lyons on a 2-year deal at only $900K. Can he repeat this every offseason, getting these insanely cheap one-year deals? We'll see. I liked his draft in 2023. I thought Danielson was a bit of a reach, but ASP was a fantastic pick. So, and Trey Augustine, I also think is pretty good. Very, very good season for Yzerman. People, it's kind of weird. I've been a critic of the Yzer plan, but like I was defending it towards the end of the season because we were saying if he missed the playoffs, it's a massive failure of a season. We got to relax. We got to relax in Detroit. They took a step this year. Yes, they kind of fell off towards the end, but they're still trending in the right direction. Kevin Adams, I think I'm going to go bad, man. You look at his free agency moves. Who did they end up there? Actually, no, they ended up drafting Zach Benson. So for that alone, I'm going to put him in mad. That was a fantastic pick. But signs Clifton, signs Eric Johnson, those kind of fall flat on their face. And as a result, Buffalo really was not that competitive a team. Didn't really do much at the deadline. Traded Kyle Okposo. Pretty mess season by Kevin Adams outside of that Zach Benson pick at 13th overall. That really saves him in terms of that. Bill Armstrong, I'm gonna go solid. Simashev and Boot were a bit of reaches in my opinion. He did end up signing Logan Cooley to his ELC, which was pretty big. Not a ton of deadline moves. Solid job by Bill Armstrong. Solid job. Can't really go in either direction. Arizona did kind of crap out towards the end of the season, but that wasn't necessarily his fault. There weren't a ton of expectations. Tom Fitzgerald, pretty bad. The goaltending was a problem coming into the season. Although we didn't expect it to be this bad, we all thought Vanacek and Schmid, Vanacek and Dawes, that's not a legit contending goalie tandem. That's going to be a problem. Didn't think it was going to be that big of a problem. It ended up being that he waited far too long to address it with the Jake Allen trade. And I'm not even sure the Jake Allen trade is long-term fix addressing it, on top of the fact of only getting a second and a third for Tyler Toffoli. I thought they could have got at least the first. Not ready to shit on Fitz. He was fantastic the prior 3 to 4 years in terms of drafting and developing and trading, but this year was definitely a down year for Tom Fitzgerald. And also the Timo Meier extension is not looking bad, but at $8.8 million, you definitely expect a little bit more. Julien Brisebois, I'm going to go meh. The Duclair deadline move was very good. I didn't really like the Dumba one that much. They're just a team kind of trending downward. He couldn't really have done anything. All things considered, he didn't have a first round pick to deal this year. He doesn't have this year's and next year's as well, I believe. So he was kind of in a weird situation. So I'm just gonna go meh. Tampa, I wouldn't say it's a massive failure of a season, but it's definitely not a success. Mike Grier, A+. Great job by Mike Grier. When looking at it at the drafts Will Smith at 4th overall. I was a little bit critical of the pick just because I wanted Matthew Mitchkov. I thought he was a better prospect. But Will Smith's looking like a stud. Quinn Musty at 26th overall. Guy was like 2 points per game in the OHL this year. He was fantastic. Then trades Erik Karlsson. Yes, they did take on some money. Yes, they only got a first-round pick, but that first-round pick ended up being 14th overall. Fantastic value. Then coming into this season, trades Hurdle. Gets a first-round pick and a 2023 first-round pick on top of signing Colin Graff, and they win the first overall pick. I know that's not really Grier's doing, but like they executed the tank perfectly, and as a result, now they're in a very great situation. Patrick Alvin also got to go great. Just made those depth moves that the Canucks needed to overall boost their depth scoring for the most part. Guys like Lafferty, Pius Suter. DeSmith was very good at the start of the season, did kind of fall off towards the end. Carson Soucy, signing him. Zadorov trade. Lindholm, they still paid a lot, but he's playing a lot better in the playoffs. So a great job by Patrick Alvin, really this year he didn't acquire any core pieces, but got that depth to let those guys flourish. Bill Zito, great job as well. When looking at Zito, OEL signing, he was massive for them the first 20 games of the season as the borderline number one with Gustav Forsling. Evan Rodriguez deal is looking fantastic in Tarasenko. I know that kind of fell into his lap similarly to an Yzer. Also, I forgot Yzerman, DeBrincat. Although DeBrincat wasn't really that good this year, still fantastic deal for them. You can maybe even move Yzerman up. But when looking at Zito as well, getting the Tarasenko deal fall into his lap for the most part, great job by Bill Zito. Brad Treliving, bad. Similarly, the goaltending position, although Samsonov was good last year, didn't really address that. Signs a guy like John Klingberg, who absolutely shits the bed. Bertuzzi and Domi were okay, but does nothing at the deadline outside of getting slow, big defensemen. And surprise, when your defenseman can't move the puck, you're going to have a tough time scoring in the playoffs. So when looking at it, the Leafs being a first-round exit, Brad Treliving definitely has a part in that. Rob Blake, Bad as well, man. Rob Blake, pretty bad as well, mainly just because of that PLD trade. He also gave up a decent amount of assets in order to retain Vladislav Gavrikov. Gavrikov was very good for them, but they maybe overpaid a little bit. They did get rid of Peterson's contract with that, but it comes down to the PLD trade. That severely limited them this season in terms of trading the better player in Gabe Vilardi as well as Alex Iafallo. Disaster of a trade. Didn't do anything at the deadline. Kind of as a result, they were cap crunched and didn't have a ton of assets. Bill Guerin, I'm going to go meh. Again, not a good season by him by any stretch, but he's also severely hampered by having like $14 million in dead cap. He's going to be judged in not this season, but the following season after. Once all that dead money's off the books, then he's going to have some real pressure on him. Kelly McCrimmon, I'm going to go good. Although he may be overpaid or paid a lot at the deadline, he gave this team a legitimate chance to repeat as Cup champions. They went up 2-0 against the Dallas Stars. They kind of just shat the bed. Not really his fault. Dallas had a top 5 talent roster, top 3 arguably in the entire NHL, just couldn't get it done. I think McCrimmon did do a good job. He was very smart of moving off Riley Smith. People kind of doubted that decision. Only got a 3rd round pick. Riley Smith was barely, not even probably worth this $5 million cap hit. Very good job by him. Chris McFarland, it's tough because in the offseason, fails to address the second line center position. Ryan Johansson brings in Miles Wood, Ross Colton, who are decent players, but doesn't really address that. Then at the deadline, gets very aggressive, trades for Sean Walker, trades for Casey Middlestat, gets rid of Bowen Byram. I think it's a solid job overall, a very active job, and he also drafted Mikhail Gulyev, which I really like that pick. You can maybe put him in good, maybe I'm a bit biased because the Colorado Avalanche are down 3-1 right now. It looks like it's not going to work in terms of this season, but I think he did a solid job, all things considered. Kent Hughes, good job. Good job, not going to lie, when looking at what he's done in the last year. Drafts Reinbacher. I think giving up the 31st and 37th overall pick might have been a little bit of an overpayment for Alex Newhook. Just value considered, although Newhook might end up being the best player out of those 3 potential players. But when looking at it, Monahan trade was fantastic. Re-signed Monahan this offseason and for only $1.9 million, then trades him for a goddamn first-round pick. Ken Hughes has just done a very good job at accumulating assets for this Montreal Canadiens team, and as a result, they're in a very good spot. Barry Trotz, another good job. I questioned what he was doing this offseason when he bought out Duchesne, traded Johansson, and then signed Ryan O'Reilly. Fantastic deal, the Ryan O'Reilly deal, looking like one of the best, and hired Andrew Brunette. And as a result, Nashville, although I don't think they have the best future, are a highly competitive team right now, and Barry Trotz deserves some flowers for that. Craig Conroy, solid to good. I'm just happy. I'm going to put him in good just because I'm happy that the Calgary Flames finally sold. Instead of re-signing a 34-year-old Chris Tanev, giving Lindholm an 8-year, $7.5 million contract, they committed to at least a retool. Are they going to go a full rebuild? We're definitely going to see, but right now they are retooling pretty heavy. And although I think he maybe could have got more assets than he ended up getting, I still think it's very good work by Craig Conroy, all things considered. Next up, Kyle Davidson. I'm going to put him in solid. I know he drafted Connor Bedard this year in the past year. I can't really count that towards him because he didn't influence the draft lottery. But yeah, gets Connor Bedard. Oliver Moore was a solid selection. Not a ton of moves at this year's deadline for the most part. Chicago kind of sold very heavy last year. So I think just overall, solid job by Kyle Davidson. I just realized my screen is like tiny. I definitely should have this bigger. Ron Francis, meh. I don't even remember exactly. Maybe just because it's Seattle, I don't really remember exactly what he did in this past year. There's not too much of note, and as a result, because he didn't really do anything special, Seattle went from a 100-point team to 81 points this year. Unacceptable. Chris Drury, I'm going to go solid. Eric Gustafson signing, Jonathan Quick signing, both very good. Didn't really do much at the deadline with Jack Roslovic and Alex Weinberg. They've been okay. I'm going to go solid, though. The core was already in place. He got some decent depth pieces, but beyond that, nothing that special. I should probably bump him up to good. I'm not going to lie. That's kind of some hater energy. They're still up 3-2 right now. Won the goddamn President's Trophy. I'm going to be respectful. Danny Briere, might be too nice at this point. Danny Briere, I'm going to put in good when looking at him trading, trading Provorov, like one of the first big deals, getting assets for that to get rid of that contract, takes on Peterson, who really gives a shit. They're rebuilding for the most part. Then when looking at it, although he did trade Cutter Gauthier, that was out of his hands, man. I can't really hate him on that. And I forgot Matvei Michkov. That was a fantastic draft pick, as well as Oliver Bonk is looking very good. He's in a weird spot because now Tortorella is raising this group out of potentially rebuilding, so I don't know how their long-term future goes, but I still think Danny Briere had a very good past year for the Philadelphia Flyers. Don Waddell, I'm going to go solid. I know the Jake Gensel deal was the biggest deal of the deadline, and he might not give up a first-round pick unless they make the playoffs, unless they make the Stanley Cup final, but I still think the Orlov signing was kind of horrendous in terms of $7.75 million for a guy that's on your third pair. I know he's been good in their third pair, but still I thought that was an overpayment on top of Kuznetsov. Okay, but he still has a decently high cap hit. I know they got him, but they're paying a decent amount for him at $4 million. I think he did solid. I don't think that he did anything that special, and if they end up losing to the Rangers, that's a massive failure. Kevin Cheveldayoff, great. The reverse of the PLD trade. The reverse of the PLD trade was very, very good. On top of the fact that although they lost in 5 games, I don't really blame him. I blame maybe more so the coaching staff and the defense core, which I guess you could say you should have traded for a defenseman, but fantastic value on the Tyler Toffoli trade. Solid value on the Sean Monahan trade. He made this team into a legit contender, or at least a legit contender that we thought was a contender coming into the playoffs. And then they kind of just shat the bed against Colorado. That's not really on him. Ken Holland, not a ton this year. Adam Henrique's hurt right now, so that kind of kills his deadline move. I'm going to put him in meh. This year didn't really do that much overall for the team. Now that I think about it, they didn't have that much flexibility. I guess I could put him in meh just because the Evan Bouchard bridge deal looks fantastic. Only $4 million this season and next. It's going to bite him in the ass. You should have given him a long-term deal, but in the short term, very good deal. Meh. Not a ton. Maybe should have addressed the goaltending position, but he wasn't going to trade Jack Campbell quite yet, and Stuart Skinner looked promising even though he shot the bed in the playoffs. That would be kind of some hindsight. Kyle Dubas, bad. I'm going to go bad. When looking at Kyle Dubas, Erik Karlsson trade, he plants his flag. He's saying, I believe in this core. We can win now. Let me go trade for the top trade chip, the reigning Norris winner. They suck. They don't get it done at the deadline. Then they wave the white flag, trade Jake Gensel. Don't even get that good of a package back for Jake Gensel. I know they made a late playoff push beyond that. Riley Smith trade doesn't really look that good. Braden Yeager was a good draft pick, though. But overall, I think it's a very disappointing first year for Kyle Dubas in Pittsburgh. I'm not going to lie. And then lastly, we got Doug Armstrong, not Bill Armstrong. I'm going to put him in meh. St. Louis was pretty uninspiring this year. Okay team, nothing special. Maybe should have moved off Pavel Buchnevich with a year and a half left. They could have got a massive haul for him, but they ended up not doing it. The Torrey Krug deal ended up falling through. That kind of stunk. Yeah, that was in the last year. But that meh. And then John Davidson. This is kind of unfair because I'm just going to throw him in meh just because he got the job in early February once Jarmo Kekalainen was stepped down. So I can't really tier list him for the most part. But yeah, this is my tier list for this season. Let me know in the comments. What do you think about it? Who would you move up? Who would you move down? I'll be seeing the next one.